Well, all the data banks in Little R2 are still secure.
Well, then I think we're due that reward that you promised, don't you think? And I hope it's substantial after all we've gone through.
When Little R2 has been safely delivered to my forces, you'll receive your reward.
Cindy Williams, an icon who lit up the screen, making us laugh and feel every moment. But behind that sparkling exterior was a story only a few knew. As she entered her final years, there were struggles, moments of quiet reflection, and a legacy left unfinished. This isn't just another tribute, it's the untold story of Cindy Williams, her final days at 75, and a journey that leaves us asking, what did we miss? In 1982, everything changed. At the height of Laverne and Shirley's success, Cindy Williams suddenly walked off the set while pregnant and never came back. Headlines said, creative differences. But the truth? It was way deeper than that. Behind the closed doors, tensions with Penny Marshall were boiling over. There were rumors, eye rolls, producers pushing too hard, and a script demanding she work on her due date. The lawsuit followed. Millions were involved, and the fans were stunned, wondering what really went down. And this sitcom became a turning point in Cindy's life. But how did a sitcom sweetheart like Cindy Williams end up in the middle of lawsuits, health scares, and public heartbreak? What Cindy Williams faced more behind-the-scenes battles than fans ever imagined. Cindy Williams was born on August 22, 1947, right in the heart of Van Nuys in Los Angeles. But her life didn't start with red carpets and camera flashes. Back then, she was just Cynthia Jane Williams, a little girl raised by her mother, Francesca, who worked as a waitress, and her father, Bichard, better known as Bill, who worked with electronics. The family was humble and working class, nothing glamorous, but it was grounded, and it was real. Not long after Cindy was born, her family packed up and moved to Dallas, Texas. She wasn't even old enough to remember most of it, but those early years in Texas gave her a taste of a different kind of life, quieter, slower. Then, at the age of 10, the Williams family came back to Los Angeles. And that's when things really started to shift. Los Angeles in the late 50s was already buzzing with movie magic. Being surrounded by the film industry, even from a distance, was like having a constant reminder that dreams could actually come true. For Cindy, that wasn't just some idea, it was a calling. She started acting out scenes, writing little plays, and putting on performances for anyone who would watch. Most of those shows were at her local church, but even then, she took it seriously. She had this spark in her, a mix of imagination and determination, that made it clear she wasn't just playing around.
I just want to be alone with you for a minute. It must be awful for you. But it'll be over soon.
Not all of it.
What do you mean?
Nothing. I've always wanted an attic, you know?
At Birmingham High School, Cindy really started to find her rhythm. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking, but she stood out because she was so natural on stage. She was the kind of girl who could make a serious scene feel real, and a funny one feel even funnier. She graduated in 1965, right around the same time, another future star, Sally Field. At home, things weren't always easy. Her dad had his battles with alcohol, and money was tight. But even with the challenges, there was love in the house and laughter. Her father had a gift for impressions, especially of old-school comedians like Jackie Gleason. He'd perform around the house, cracking everyone up, and Cindy soaked it all in. She didn't know it yet, but those goofy living room acts were shaping her comic instincts. They were teaching her timing, delivery, and maybe most importantly, how to connect with an audience, even if that audience was just her mom and sister Carol Ann. One of Cindy's earliest inspirations was Debbie Reynolds. She didn't just admire her, she idolized her. Cindy would sit around imagining Debbie discovering her in one of her school plays and whisking her off to stardom. It might have sounded like a daydream to most people, but for Cindy, that little fantasy was the thing that kept her going. It gave her something to chase, something to believe in. After high school, she enrolled at Los Angeles City College and majored in theater. It wasn't some backup plan or a hobby. She was all in. She took classes, studied the craft, and kept auditioning for anything she could. To pay the bills, she waited tables, at one point working at the legendary Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub, where the music was loud and the tips were decent. She wasn't getting big roles yet, but every little part mattered. Every audition taught her something. Every no made her tougher. And she kept going, not because someone promised her a future, but because she believed there had to be one. By the time she started getting noticed, Cindy already had years of experience under her belt. Not on TV, but in life. She knew how to work hard. She knew what it meant to struggle. And she knew who she was, even before Hollywood ever figured it out. Even after getting knocked down by rejections, she never stopped. But how did she rise to become one of TV's most iconic comedic queens?
Poor Harold. I would love to take you with me, but you would never be happy in Hollywood.
Foster Grant sunglasses do strange things for some people. Slip into a pair and they seem to slip into a whole new mood.
Face it, Harold. The only thing you ever gave me was a cold.
After her days in college theater and national commercials, she got her early footing with small TV appearances in the late 60s and early 70s. She showed up in shows like Room 222, Nanny and the Professor, and Love American Style. They all were bit parts, but enough to put her face in front of the camera and start chipping away at the Hollywood wall.
6, take 1.
I don't care if you leave this second.
What is wrong with you? You're acting like a snotty little bitch. She wants everybody to...
What did you call me? Oh, God, come on.
I thought you didn't want to dance.
Listen, smile or something, Steve. Everybody's watching.
Her first stamp came in 1973 with American Graffiti, where she played Laurie Henderson, Ron Howard's on-screen girlfriend. It was directed by George Lucas. The film was a cultural phenomenon, and Cindy stood out. She brought something to Laurie that wasn't written in the script, and the industry noticed. A BAFTA nomination soon followed, and suddenly people in the casting rooms were saying her name with a little more weight. But none of it compared to what came next.
Hi, big fella. I know we're a tad upset.
It's not gonna work.
In 1975, Cindy and Penny Marshall were invited to guest star on Happy Days as two fun, flirty brewery workers named Laverne and Shirley. The chemistry was lightning, and people couldn't get enough. Audiences loved the vibe, the humor, the working-class energy. So in 1976, Laverne and Shirley was born, and Cindy Williams became Shirley Feeney, the more wholesome, sensible half of the dynamic duo. And just like that, she became a household name. The show dominated the ratings, climbing to #1. One in its second season. At its peak, it was drawing over 20 million views per week. At that time, Laverne and Shirley was one of the rare female lead comedies on prime time. By the late 70s, she was at the center of one of the most watched shows in America. She was headlining specials, attending award shows, and becoming one of the most recognized faces on television. In her era where fame was starting to get louder and flashier, Cindy kept it grounded. And that's why it stuck, and Shirley Feeney didn't fade into the rerun pile. She became a classic, and so did Cindy. Far from the spotlight, Cindy had her personal life that wasn't always as perfect as it seemed. But how did her personal life impact her career? Was there something we weren't able to see? After years of lighting up the screen and becoming a household name, Cindy Williams found herself in a very different spotlight. One that didn't involve sitcom scripts or studio audiences. It was the kind that comes from real life, outside the frame, where things don't get a second take. In the early 1980s, Cindy's path crossed with the man who would become her husband, Bill Hudson. Now, if the name sounds familiar, that's because it should. Bill Hudson wasn't just some background extra in the Hollywood scene. He was 1/3 of the pop trio the Hudson Brothers, a group that had a brief brush with fame in the 70s. Bill was also known for being charming, ambitious, and already carrying the kind of history that would make any future relationship complicated. He had just come out of a high-profile marriage to Goldie Hawn. That relationship ended with 2 kids, Kate and Oliver Hudson. But when Cindy met Bill, all of that was part of his past. The two clicked in a way that wasn't just about being in the same industry. And by 1982, they got married. With a new marriage, and life shifting fast behind the scenes, something had to give. So even though Laverne Shirley was still riding high, Cindy walked away from the show on its 8th season. What caused her to take this toughest decision, risking all over her future and career? As Laverne Shirley was climbing the charts and cementing itself as one of the biggest sitcoms, things behind the scenes weren't nearly as cheerful as the opening credits made it seem. Fame was a blessing, sure, but it was also a slow-burning fuse. Tension between Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall had started brewing long before anything blew up publicly. They had different working styles, different creative visions, and over time, those differences stopped being manageable. When 2 leads are both brilliant, both driven, and both trying to protect their space in a show that made them household names, things can get complicated. And that's exactly what happened.
When the time comes, I'll handle Carmine.
What started as small disagreements turned into more frequent clashes. Control over storylines, screen time, and the direction of the characters became recurring issues. Both actresses wanted more say in how their roles were portrayed, and as the show evolved, it started to tilt more and more toward Penny's character, Laverne. That didn't sit right with Cindy. The show was originally built around the chemistry of 2 equals, and now she was watching that balance shift. On top of that, the family dynamics within the production didn't make things easier. Gary Marshall, Penny's brother, was deeply involved in the show's creation and behind-the-scenes decisions. So when conflicts arose, Cindy sometimes felt like she was on the outside, fighting battles that were harder to win. And things really came to a head right when Cindy announced she was pregnant. But she didn't know it was going to take a turn she never expected. At first, the production team seemed supportive. They reassured her that her pregnancy would be written into the storyline, that she'd be accommodated, and that everything could continue without disruption. It sounded reasonable. She wasn't asking for special treatment, just basic respect and realistic expectations during a major life moment. But those promises, they didn't last. As time went on, the tone shifted. Instead of following through with what they'd initially said, the studio handed her a new contract, one that basically ignored every agreement they had made. It required her to work all the way up until her due date, with no real flexibility, no support, and no consideration for the promises that were made in the first place.
All right. You have your dreams, and I'll try not to make fun of them. But it won't be easy.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much.
Cindy saw his contract nonsense and stupid. She refused to sign the contract. She felt cornered, expected to keep going under increasingly difficult conditions, while being treated like her pregnancy was some kind of inconvenience, instead of a reality they had already planned for. She had put in the work. She had helped build this show. And now, when she needed understanding, it felt like she was being pushed out. The whole situation spiraled quickly. What should have been a moment of excitement for her personally turned into a professional standoff. She had been told she could work through mid-October without issue. That was the plan. But as the months passed, those earlier conversations didn't hold any weight. It was all about the contract now. Sign or leave. That's how it felt. And so, she left. Cindy's departure wasn't a quiet fade-out. It was abrupt. Shirley just disappeared from the show. There was no send-off, no final goodbye. She was just gone after her last episode, which was featured on October 12th, 1982. Titled as Window on Main Street, Cindy walked away. She had a reason. But what about Penny Marshall? What did that mean for the other half of the iconic duo? Was Penny just getting started? Just because Cindy left didn't mean the lights went out for everyone. After Cindy's departure, Penny Marshall continued Laverne and Shirley with her co-star for its final season. The dynamic shifted, and while Penny did her best to keep the season going, but the chemistry that made the show a hit was clearly missing. Ratings declined, and the show wrapped in 1983. But Penny didn't fade into the background. She transitioned into directing and quickly made history. In 1988, she became the first woman to direct a film that grossed over $100 million with Big, and followed it up with more hits like Awakenings in 1990, which also earned Oscar nominations, while A League of Their Own in 1992 became a classic, showcasing her gift for mixing heart with humor. Penny became a role model for female directors in Hollywood, and through it all, she stayed in the game, producing, directing, and acting occasionally, building her place not just as Laverne, but as a force of her own. But for Cindy, it didn't end on set. Cindy didn't let it slide. After the backstage drama and what felt like betrayal, what decisions Cindy made against the Paramount to regret their actions?
There is no rest of it, Mr.
Oh,
Fozzie.
wait a minute. Do you mean to tell me that I gotta cook and eat and wash and do all the other things I normally do in this one small room?
A good grasp of the concept. You see...
So after all the chaos on set, the tension with Penny, the broken promises, and the contract drama, Cindy Williams had enough. She wasn't just going to walk away quietly. In August 1982, Cindy filed a $20 million lawsuit against Paramount Television and Laverne and Shirley's producer Gary Marshall. And this wasn't some petty legal jab. This was serious. Cindy claimed the studio completely went back on their word. They wanted her to work all the way up until her actual due date. Imagine that. Shooting scenes, memorizing lines, running around on set, while 9 months pregnant. In the lawsuit, she accused Paramount and Gary Marshall of breach of contract. She was supposed to earn $75,000 per episode, and that also had a cut of the show's profits, which had become a huge success by then. But instead of honoring that, the production tried to cut her out. So Cindy sued not just for money she was owed, but for the emotional distress they caused. $20 million worth. Cindy took on industry, stood her ground in court, and said goodbye to the sitcom life of Shirley. But was that the end of Cindy's journey, or just the start of a whole new chapter? Once the dust settled and the drama headlines cooled off, Cindy didn't just fade into the background. She raised herself and got right back to work. Because despite the dramatic exit from Laverne and Shirley, Cindy was still very much in the game. Her career didn't hit pause, it just shifted gears. Right out the gate, she slid back into film. She returned for More American Graffiti. It picked up on Laurie's story, Ron Howard's character's wife. The film didn't exactly blow up like the first one, but still, it gave her another chance to revisit a fan-favorite role, and audiences appreciated that continuity.
Just because you don't know about something doesn't mean it's going to bite you. You have to have faith. You have to have trust. Now, if you have faith and trust, then the unknown will have faith and trust. I tell you, this creature means no harm. Oh! It's playing. Just having fun. It's joking.
That's when she started leaning into the quirky stuff, but kind of strange, that made you love her even more. In the early 80s, she took on some totally offbeat projects, like The Creature Wasn't Nice, also known as Naked Space. It was this bonkers sci-fi spoof that starred Leslie Nielsen. And yes, it was as ridiculous as it sounds. Then there was Euphoria. Now this one's wild, not just in content, but in how it was handled. It was filmed in 1981 but didn't get a real release until 1985. The movie had this strange energy, part romance, part alien conspiracy, and Cindy was paired with Fred Ward. Honestly, it's one of those cult classic if you know type movies. And even if it didn't light up the box office, critics actually praised her performance for being grounded and quirky at the same time. Moving into the TV world, Cindy definitely didn't sit still. She kept popping up in new sitcoms, some of which fizzled fast. She stayed booked and busy. In 1985, she starred in a pilot called Joanna, which aired as a one-time special. The network didn't pick it up for a full series, but that didn't stop her. In 1990, she landed a role in Normal Life, a sitcom inspired by the real-life family of Frank Zappa. She played the mom opposite Moon Unit and Dweezil Zappa. It was short-lived, but again, it showed her range. Cindy wasn't just leaning on her Shirley fame, she was exploring weird, fun corners of television. Then, in the early 90s, that show actually stuck around for a bit. She played a social worker, Kathy Hale, raising kids with her best friend. And guess what? The show was created by the same folks behind Laverne Shirley, so it kind of felt like a full-circle moment. Despite all the drama back in the day, she was still collaborating with people from that old world.
Mayday. I know all about Mei Ling, Claire. Where is she now? Don't know.
And of course, Cindy sprinkled in tons of guest appearances. She appeared in Law & Order, SVU, Touched by an Angel, 8 Simple Rules, and even Girlfriends. She always brought warmth and timing to her roles, whether she was doing comedy or drama. Now how can we forget about the film industry? Because Cindy didn't stop at the screen, she also hit the stage. She toured in several national productions, including Grease, Moon Over Buffalo, and Death Trap. She got glowing reviews, especially for her comedic timing. She had that old-school sitcom rhythm that translated really well to stage comedy. One of her most memorable stage pairings came later on, when she reunited with Eddie Mecca, Carmine from Laverne and Shirley. They did regional productions of It Had to Be You together, and fans were obsessed. The chemistry was still there after all those years, and it was such a sweet nostalgia trip for everyone watching. In 2007, Cindy finally made her Broadway debut. She played Mrs. Tottendale in The Drowsy Chaperone. The show was already a hit, and Cindy brought this lovable, loopy energy to the role. It was classic musical theater, and it just worked. She fit right in like she'd been doing Broadway her whole life. And just when you think she might slow down, in 2013, she reunited with Penny Marshall on Sam and Cat, that Nickelodeon show with Jeanette McCurdy and Ariana Grande. The episode was called Sam and Cat, and it was a total throwback. Cindy knew she'd been through it all. Every heartbreak, hustle, and hard lessons. But how did she finally let the world hear her truth?
This is the first season of Laverne Shirley, and I want you to all just give me a little margin here because I have a hideous accent. I thought that everyone in the cast was from New York, and everyone had an accent when I first started the show, so I thought, no, I should have an accent too. And so I might be in this show sporting a really bad New York accent. So forgive me ahead of time. Thank you all.
In 2015, Cindy released her memoir, Shirley, I Jest, and it wasn't your typical tell-all. It was funny, heartfelt, and honest. She didn't air out every piece of drama, but she gave readers a solid look into her Hollywood journey, her highs, her heartbreaks, and everything in between. It was like sitting down with an old friend over coffee. No pretentiousness, just real stories from someone who'd been through the industry ringer and still came out smiling. In her memoir, Cindy Williams didn't hold back when it came to talking about her personal life. She opened up about her marriage. Cindy and Bill had 2 kids together, Emily Hudson and Zachary Hudson. And for a while, things seemed solid. But like a lot of Hollywood love stories, theirs came with its fair share of cracks. Cindy shared about the challenges they faced, the emotional toll of juggling a public career and private struggles, and how eventually they went their separate ways. It wasn't bitter. She was finally letting everyone peek behind the curtain a little. It showed a different side of her, not just the actress, not just Shirley, but Cindy, the woman who had to live beyond the scripts and spotlight. She'd already lived through so much, emotionally, professionally, but life wasn't done testing her. What came next, no one saw it coming.
Boy, what a swell couple of guys, huh?
Really? What fun.
Wonder where they get those tiny ties from.
After everything she had gone through in her personal life, her marriage, the divorce, the spotlight, the constant media attention, Cindy Williams still kept her head up. But behind the public smiles and occasional interviews, her health was slowly starting to betray her. Things started taking a serious turn around 2012, when years of internal stress, complications, and past medical choices began to collide all at once. It began with her lap band surgery, which she had originally gotten to manage her weight. But instead of helping, it led to severe complications. In a moment that could have turned tragic, the band slipped and cut into her abdomen, which then caused damage to other organs. She was rushed into emergency surgery, and this wasn't just any routine procedure. Doctors weren't even sure if she would make it. In fact, at one point, it was reported that her survival chances were extremely low. During recovery, she didn't just face physical pain. She described having terrifying hallucinations in the hospital, unable to tell what was real. It was like a fever dream, she later shared in an interview, where she admitted she truly thought she was dying. The pain, the fear, and the feeling of helplessness, Cindy didn't sugarcoat any of it when she finally opened up about that dark chapter. You'd think after everything life would cut her some slack, but nope, her body started turning against her too. Still, how much more was she supposed to take? The damage from the lap band surgery didn't just end there. Her kidneys had taken a hit, leading her to be diagnosed with renal failure. She had to undergo dialysis and remained on it for a long time. And dialysis isn't just a once-in-a-while treatment, it was exhausting, both mentally and physically. Cindy spoke candidly in later interviews about how drained she felt, but also how determined she was to get through it. Throughout the ordeal, she leaned heavily on her faith and her family. She didn't appear on camera much during that time, but she stayed connected through letters and statements to fans. In one statement, she said, "I've always believed in fighting through the pain. That's what my characters did, and that's what I do now." By 2013, she had undergone multiple surgeries. She suffered from sepsis, trauma, and nightmares. Her health would remain fragile, but Cindy wasn't the type to just sit back and give up. She tried to return to normal life, doing small appearances, reconnecting with her audience, and slowly rebuilding strength. But those who saw her up close said she had changed. She was softer, more reflective, and much more private. The sparkle in her eye hadn't faded, but it had become wiser, more grounded. Of course, she made it through the surgery. She fought with pain, but what happens when the real struggle begins after the recovery? When your body's healing, but your memory's slipping, and even simple things start to feel unfamiliar? Cindy never fully recovered to her former energetic self, but she never let her condition define her. Instead, she focused on peace. Peace with her past, her body, and her story. And she never once blamed the world for what happened. She just took it one day at a time, the same way she always had, quietly, honestly, and with a little bit of grace. But just because she survived didn't mean she walked away untouched. About 5 years after that nightmare, around 2017, Cindy started speaking openly about what came next. Memory lost, lingering physical exhaustion, and the mental toll that nobody really warned her about. The sepsis hadn't just threatened her life, it left behind a trail of damage. She talked about how the delayed diagnosis nearly killed her, and how the warning signs weren't taken seriously at first. The experience changed her, and she began advocating for sepsis awareness. So yeah, Cindy Williams didn't let the fallout from Laverne Shirley define her. She kept working, evolving, and showing up in theaters, on screen, and even in books. She never tried to chase trends or reinvent herself for clout. She just did the work, and people respected that. Whether it was a forgotten sci-fi comedy, a sitcom that lasted 2 episodes, or a stage production in a small-town theater, Cindy always brought her charm, her professionalism, and that unmistakable spark. She was the kind of actress who may not have always had the spotlight, but when she was on, she owned it.
Why'd you split?
What? And leave Laverne unchaperoned? Oh, no. Excuse me. I must have nodded off.
After years of battling health issues, enduring surgeries, and still finding the strength to speak out for others, Cindy kept pushing forward, holding on to her resilience the way she always had. But in early 2023, that fight came to an end. On January 25th, she passed away at the age of 75 after a brief illness. The new hit hard to fans who grew up with her, who saw themselves in her characters, mourned deeply. The tributes poured in from those she worked with, each one echoing her kindness, her talent, and the rare light she brought to every room. She built her own legacy, imprinting her character in everyone's heart. She made people laugh, cry, and most of all, love to live, just by adding a little more color to their world. Cindy may be gone, but But her legacy, that's not fading anytime soon. So what do you think? Did you grow up watching her? Maybe Laverne and Shirley was your comfort show or just a happy escape. We'd love to know. Drop your favorite memory of her in the comments. And hey, while you're here, don't miss our video, Why Queen Camilla Will Never Be Accepted by the British People. It's the royalty that needs to be revealed.